Hello, hello. Hey guys, how are my nurses doing today? It is so good to be back with you all again. Like I told you, we are doing this every day. So I want to check in. Consider this our wellness check for the day. How's everything going? I hope you guys are having a great day. If you're already off for the day, I hope you had a great shift. If you're getting ready to head in soon, Musa, you can do it. And I know it's going to be a great day for you. So today I wanted to touch base and have a conversation about boundaries nurses always struggle to set and what happens when we don't have them in place. So many nurses, present company included, because this was definitely me, we struggle with boundaries. And it's not because we don't care, it's because we care too much. If you're the kind of person that everything you do, you give it your all, you feel your integrity is attached to what you do, you feel that you want to always be seen or relied on or known as that person who follows through. Um, we can find that it can be very difficult to put boundaries in place because we always want to be seen as agreeable, beyond competent, but we want to be seen as a person who can be relied on. But somewhere along the way, boundaries have become associated with being lazy, with being unhelpful, and with being lazy. Sometimes people feel that if you don't agree to do things when asked, especially if it's something that you don't necessarily have to do, if it's something that you know is not going to align with you, that you're seen as difficult and not a team player. But when you lack boundaries and you don't have boundaries in place, boundaries or the lack of boundaries doesn't make you a compassionate person, it makes you a depleted person. And there are common struggles and boundary struggles that nurses have. We often struggle to say no to extra shifts, to emotional dumping, to working through breaks that we really should be taking to make sure that we ourselves are being replenished. And we have boundaries and saying no when it comes to staying late, time and time again. We often find ourselves saying, okay, I'll take one for the team. And if you're not careful, you will always find yourself taking one for the team, and the team doesn't necessarily make the changes that are necessary. So you don't always have to take one for the team. It just becomes a thing where you're relied upon to be that person because they know that they can count on you in that situation. So every time we override ourselves in what we know is best for us, we teach others what we're willing to tolerate. It's just the truth. It's the truth of the matter. If and when these boundaries are not set up and people see you override boundaries that you yourself have put in place for you, you know what that does? That lets them know that it's okay. Sure, he or she may balk or complain about it, squawk about it temporarily, but ultimately, they're going to do it. What it does is it sets a precedence and shows others how we are allowing ourselves to be treated. And in all honesty, this is a message that extends outside of nursing itself as well. So, what ends up being the cost of our not having boundaries in place? Because there's definitely a cost associated with it. So, the cost then becomes it isn't just physical exhaustion, it ends up being irritability. We're irritable all the time. It ends up being a loss of compassion, feeling like or looking like you're cold and indifferent. And it ends up feeling like being taken advantage of. And we all know that feeling, and it is not a good feeling. And it's unfortunate because if we're not careful, we start to paint a picture with a broad stroke, meaning any slight, any minor disagreement, sometimes from the lens which we're looking at it through when we don't have boundaries set up, everything after a while starts to look like we're being taken advantage of. And in some instances, yes, it's true, but not always. And you risk doing is taking someone's words, actions that might very well be well meaning and assigning a totally different understanding to it. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen because we haven't put the boundaries in place that we know we deserve and that we know we need. So when it comes to reframing boundaries, we have to think about it as boundaries are not walls. They're not walls. Boundaries are in place to make sure that we remain sustainable. It's so that we can be the best people we are, who we know we can be without being depleted. So, with boundaries in place, you can still be kind, you can still be committed, but guess what? You can still say no. We spoke about that yesterday, the gift of no. It's important because if you're not careful, there are situations and there are people who continue to take, take, take. And if you're naturally a giver, sometimes this is why nursing is a very easy profession for some people to have gravitated towards. Because if you're naturally a giver to begin with and you love taking care of people, it's only natural that you would gravitate towards a profession like nursing because we have an opportunity to make such a great difference in the lives of the people we come into contact with every day. But in that, you still have to be so careful that you have erected the boundaries that are necessary for you to be able to do your job, to do it effectively, but to not burn out when it's all said and done. It's very easy to say, sure, I can do that. Sure, I can do this. Sure, I can do it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it, especially when you are a go-to person who's extremely resourceful. People will end up pulling on you all the time. And like I said, that doesn't always come from a bad place and them pulling on you and looking for your expertise in an area. It shows what it is you bring to the team. But in that same token, you have to be so careful as to have balance. Balance is absolutely necessary. We cannot do what we do day in, day out if we don't have personal balance. Because the responsibilities of our job is going to be there. When you clock in, that doesn't change. From shift to shift, that doesn't change. You know what the expectation is going to be. Sure, the people you care for, there are nuances to their conditions and what treatment looks like. But ultimately, in terms of your responsibility, those are the same pretty much day to day. So you have to be sure that you have these things in place so that you yourself remain sustained. And you cannot count on anyone else to do that for you. You can't count on anyone else to be that for you. It's always great, and know that this is a space where it's a judgment-free space where we really look to see that we support each other. Nursing can be a very lonely profession when it comes to the emotional and sometimes mental impact caring for some of our patients is are. It can be a very lonely place when you know that everyone doesn't necessarily feel the exact same way you do about this particular patient, which is understandable. You're the one who've had the opportunity to get to know these patients, know who they are, know what they're about. I remember what that looked like for me as a new nurse. The first patient that I really developed a true relationship with because they were on the unit for some time. And at that time, I'd work my 12 and a half hour shifts back to back because you believe in your continuity of care. You want to make sure that your patients are pretty much seeing the same people each day. But with that, and especially because I worked the overnights, I worked a time when I would spend time in the patient's rooms, um, bathing them. And at the time, we were doing burn care, and burn care can sometimes take an hour, more than an hour to do. And if your patient is with it, this is time where you get to know them. And they may not share that much that first day, but think about that second day, that third day. You come back and you see them the following week, or if it's one of those weeks where you work your four, I would do my four in a row. These are people who get to know who you are and they start to open up and they share with you because sometimes they can't even share with their own families without feeling judged or just certain things that they don't want them to be aware of. So I remember what that looked like having that first patient that I developed that relationship with, that kind of relationship with. And ultimately, they passed away. I was devastated, devastated. I remember being in the patient's room and the providers had already had conversations and had that family meeting, and this is where they're going. These are certain things that are going to start to shut down, just making them aware of what that's going to look like, and ultimately having the patient pass away. I remember being in the room silently crying, just tears, silently flowing. And it didn't just end there because then you look at their loved one who also has a relationship with you now. Because when there were things they couldn't understand, the providers saying, who do you think they turn to? Who do patients always turn to when they don't understand something that the provider has shared with them? They look at you, they look at the nurse. You end up being that bridge between their understanding and not knowing. And even in doing that, I remember after the patient passed away, we got them ready. We took them off of the unit, or transport came and got them moved off of the unit. I remember staying in touch with the patient's family and letting them know, when it's time for the service, let me know. I'd love to come and pay my respects. And I remember doing so. And at the repass, and, at that time it was held at the patient's home. And I'm like, this is a bond that everyone doesn't have the privilege of sharing. It's such an intimate time. So I never took it lightly to be in the room and to have these conversations and this relationship with not only the patient, but their family as well. And you'd be surprised. You can think about it yourself. If you've ever had a loved one in the hospital or you yourself, you can always remember that staff member that took the time to treat you as a person, to make sure that your needs were being met or at least being addressed. So, what we do in that token and thinking about it that way, there's so many emotions that we end up taking on ourselves and taking in ourselves. And if we're not careful and we don't set up boundaries, you can only do but so much. You can only be but so much for everyone you come into contact with. So I want you to understand and know that reframing your boundaries are necessary. They're necessary to your health and your well being. And again, you can still be a kind person. You can still be a committed nurse, but you can still learn and know how to say no. So I want you to think in the comments, tell me, what boundary do you struggle with most? We all have one, at least one. We have several, truth be told. What boundary do you struggle with the most? So I want you to like this video, subscribe, and stay with me. Next time, we're going to talk about what happens when nursing again becomes your entire identity. We spoke about it briefly the other day, but I wanted to touch on that again. What does that look like when everything we do, when our entire existence is tied into being a nurse? I know and you know there is more to us than that. But I want you to know until then that what you do matters, who you are, the personal you, the you outside of the hospital, the you outside of the facility, you matter. And I want you to be here and I want you to be well. So, this is a journey we're taking together, and it's to improve, undergird, strengthen, and fortify nurses everywhere. So, please share this video with another nurse who you know needs to hear it so that the conversation we have doesn't have to be a foreign conversation. It needs to be one that stays at the forefront of everything we do because our health and our well being matters. And it has to matter to us first before it will matter to anyone else. So until next time, guys, take care, have an amazing day, and stay safe.